Good morning and welcome to a very special edition of Impact. Today, we're going to spend a full hour remembering and telling stories about our good friend Sana Elache. And I think the reason is, as we saw on Saturday at her celebration of life, she created a tremendous impact in this community. She arrived in Fort McMurray. I think Anna said it was like September 13th at 1:35 p.m. in 2004, and started helping our community grow in so many different ways. But one of the very first things that she did was take a leadership role in the formation and launch of something called Leadership with Buffalo. And I'm so honored and pleased that one of the very first participants in that program, from the very first cohort, Beth Anthony, has joined us today. Good morning, Beth.
Good morning, Russell.
Thank you for coming in. Does it seem like 10 years ago that, because I was in that cohort as well, does it seem like it was 10 years ago?
Well, I actually think it was like 11 or 12.
2006 we started.
2006 was
So
the beginning,
11.
yeah. 11 years. No, it doesn't. It seems like a lifetime ago, but how far that program has gone and the impact that it's had.
Yeah, at the celebration on Saturday, there were a lot of people from many different years of the Leadership with Buffalo program, including several others from our first, Marlene was there, and Monica.
Yeah.
So by way of context, if anybody's listening, the Leadership with Buffalo program was created really to meet a need in the community. We were losing a lot of our longtime volunteers. They were retiring and moving away from the community, and some very smart people, including Sana, recognized that we needed to do something to help potential leaders of the future grow, and we were the first guinea pigs. It was kind of awesome.
It was awesome.
What is your... Do you have any memories of the very first day? Like, what did we do? Did we go on a retreat or something? What did we do at the very beginning of the program?
Well, the retreat, I think, was at the Discovery Center. And I remember going there and thinking, I'm the youngest one here and it's freaking me out. Because I was 26 and had just started, co-founded the Justin Slade Youth Foundation, and we had just started the Dugout at that time. And I was like, I don't have a clue what I'm doing here. All these people are so old and wiser than I am. And then I met this firecracker, Sana, and I had never met anybody like her before. So I was very intrigued by the whole thing.
Describe for the listeners the role that she played in your memory. Like, what was her role as part of the whole program?
So my understanding is that she was the founding executive director. She was the person that Linda Ball and Helen Duncan and others had sort of designated as the champion of this. And for me, I viewed her as somebody to really emulate and look up to. She was a very confident woman. She was educated and just had a passion in her that was just it was electrifying and it was contagious. And it really drew me to her, and it was a very impressionable time in my life. And so I really just soaked it all up like a sponge.
You've had a heck of a decade, personally and otherwise. Is there a lesson or two from Sana that served you in the last 10 years?
This past week, when you asked me to come on the show, I do a reading every morning, and there was the reading that happened that morning that you asked me, I think really sums it up and talks about mentorship. And I didn't realize the impact that Sana had on my life until she passed away. And then reflecting very deeply on character traits and things that I hold of high value now that are directly related to her impact in my life. And so I just want to read this little paragraph quickly. It says, everyone is a role model to someone, whether good or bad. We all have influence. We may not want to be or feel that we're worthy of role model status, but people may be watching and following our example when we aren't aware that they are doing it. We may think our behavior affects only ourselves, but that is not how life works. We don't choose to be role models, we just are. People look up to us not because we ask them to, but because we live in a way that attracts their attention. Mm-hmm. And that, for me, is really how I viewed Sana. She didn't She wasn't looking to be well known. It was always about somebody else. When I would see her, she would hug me, deeply, like she was going to break my bones, and say, "How are you, Beth?" And at one point I moved to Red Deer and had some business cards made up just to give to people, and I had on there, community builder, people connector, and lover of all things coffee. And that community builder and people connector piece I really attribute that to Sana and the impact she had in my life.
It really speaks to the value of this, I'll call it organic mentorship. And perhaps that program, the Leadership with Buffalo program, did that in some sort of an organized way. It certainly affected you, it affected me, and you get a sense of it affected a lot of people.
Absolutely, and I think that for me, it showed me that leadership comes in many forms, and it doesn't matter what title you hold and what position you hold. You can be a leader as a janitor just as well as you can be a leader as a CEO. And it's sort of a servant mentality of serving others and wanting others to succeed in life and doing whatever you can to groom them and mentor them along the way in any role that you're in.
One of the elements of the program that we experienced was sort of a case study project. Mm-hmm. And you were in a group, I was in a different group. What is your memory of that process? I can't remember if you had a good experience or there was full attention. What's your memory of that case study that you did way back when? And what was your project?
So my case study was on the development of the regional municipality of Wood Buffalo.
Dave Benoit was in your group.
That's right. Yeah. So it was when Fort McMurray decided to amalgamate with all the other towns. And I had never been a part of this sort of learning environment before, where we're going to take real life things that have happened and pull out the leadership bits out of it. So what was the leadership behind making that happen? And I remember there was another group that did something to do with the Clearwater River. Yeah. And it was totally remarkable to me how we would take real life scenarios and play those out. And how that happened, and interview the people that were there, and the conflicts that happened, and the way it happened, and pull the learnings out of that. It was completely brilliant to me.
And part of the role of Sana and her leadership team within Leadership with Buffalo is to take that case study that we started, and they changed it and evolved it over 10 years. Yeah. So by the time the last cohort went through, it was quite a bit different. But in each case, though, the learnings were pretty remarkable. How did you respond on Saturday? Like, how was Saturday for you? We had so many people. We had Syncrude people. We had Keano College people. A bunch of Leadership with Buffalo alum. The Multicultural Association was well represented, and many other friends. What was it like for you?
After hearing about Sana's death, it really rocked me in a way that was very unexpected. Many people shared that they had regrets about not having that last coffee with her, or having that last dinner, or that last chat, and I felt some of that as well. Life takes us in a lot of different directions, and I didn't get to have that last coffee with her. It had been quite some time since we saw each other. And I was, emotionally relatively in a good place until I got there, and all of her art was displayed before you went into the main hall. And to me, that's just like, almost like the soul of the person is in that stuff, right? Who they are and the place that they were in their life. And I saw some of the paintings and remember seeing those in her house. And I didn't realize that she had painted those herself. And so I was a lot more emotional about it than I expected to be. But, with everybody else, they wanted it to be a celebration of life. There were beautiful decorations, lots of color, and that's exactly how Sana would have wanted it. So we got through it, we made it. And
was there a story, fun or otherwise, that stuck out for you?
Well, I have two memories that really stick out about Sana. The first one is when her son wrote a book, and I don't remember what kind of book it was, but that woman was over the moon. Like, she was so proud of her son that he would accomplish that, and he was quite young, maybe still in high school. And she was just so proud of him, and just the look on her face, that pride, that's something that always stuck out to me. And when I moved back here 4 years ago, I was invited over to her house to share a meal with her and some of her work colleagues, because they worked with my sister as well at Syncrude. And you know, when like they talk about having simple meals, there was nothing simple about the meal that Sana put on for us. It was elaborate, and there was lots of it, and I love Lebanese food, so I stuffed myself, and we played games out on her back patio and just had an absolutely wonderful time. And her gift of hospitality was something that not a lot of people have, the gift of hospitality the way that she did.
When you look down the road to the future of this community, do you still see Sana and the ripples that she created affecting it?
I do, and I believe that you will, because there are, I don't know, a couple hundred people that have had that impact from her, that have been inspired to make a difference in their community, and they will continue to do that. So, you know, there will be boards that have positions that are filled. There will be events like food drives that will have volunteers, because something was instilled in them, the importance of thinking outside themselves and their own little world to a community that will thrive because of the volunteerism.
Well, any closing thoughts? We're going to take a break and come in with Justine Rukeba from the Multicultural Association. But any closing thoughts from you, Beth, and reflecting on an amazing life? Because it was a beautiful life that Sana lived.
She did have a beautiful life. I'm going to miss her immensely, and the example, when I met her, I was like, wow, look at this strong, educated woman, you know, that nothing, you know, stopped her from doing what she felt she needed to do. She had such a supportive husband and son that just encouraged her and were her, you know, biggest champions, I believe. And there's definitely going to be a hole left where she once was. So.
Beth, thank you so much for coming in.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Beth was in the inaugural cohort of Leadership Wood Buffalo under the leadership of Sana Elache, who tragically was killed a number of weeks ago. We celebrated her life in a beautiful way on Saturday afternoon, and we're sharing some more memories and stories here today. We're going to take a break and come back with Justine Rukeba from the Multicultural Association of Wood Buffalo. Sana was the chair of that organization before she passed. You're listening to a special edition of Impact right here on 91.1 The Bridge. Welcome back to the show, a very special edition of Impact, celebrating the life and impact of Sana Elache. We celebrated her life in a glorious way, I thought, on Saturday afternoon, thanks in big part to support from the Multicultural Association of Wood Buffalo. Justine Rukeba is with us today. She is the executive director, and before we go any further, Justine, thank you to you and your team and everything that you did to make what I thought was just a beautiful, beautiful afternoon. Thank you.
My pleasure. I think to me, I didn't foresee it happening that way. It definitely exceeded my expectations, but thank you to you and to the entire community. Really, they came together and showed the support in a meaningful way.
I have a sense, and I don't know this, but was Sana part of the process of bringing you to Fort McMurray?
No, no.
Okay, she wasn't on the hiring committee. Okay.
No, but I was in Fort McMurray for obviously personal reasons, and but I met Sana in my third week, and so really her impact on me joining and loving the community and eventually joining the Multicultural Association was really. I would say really she made an impact for me to join. I wasn't intending to, join any organization, but she really convinced me.
There were a lot of stories on Saturday of the first meeting with Sana. Beautiful stories of. Describe what you remember about first meeting her.
To me, not even what I remember. Every time you saw Sana, even in a distance, she's smiling and you start to smile before you speak. Meaning that her impact you start to feel it before you even hug. And of course, once you give her a hug and once she gives you a big hug, I mean, the rest is history. To me, her personality is so magical. And she could attract anyone and, anyone and to just come to her life and be part of what she's really passionate about.
You came into the Multicultural Association as the executive director in somewhat of a rebuilding phase of the organization. I think at one point after the fire, you had, Rhodas was all by herself for a period of time, and you were brought in. What was the role or the dynamic between you and your chair, who is Sana, in terms of the process of taking an excellent organization and making it even stronger?
Sana was very, very honest person, and she didn't have a minute to hide of the struggles that we're going through. Obviously, the effect for the fire, and the staff had left, and we had multiple board members who had left the community. But they stayed on just because they wanted to make sure everything is in a smooth transaction. But to me, it was a question of what I was getting myself into. That I did notice that there was so much to do, especially with 4 to 5 month delay in every action, including the annual audit and to the AGM. So I was hired 2 days before AGM, and to work 2 days to prepare for annual general meeting of the people and the organization you've never met was just probably the most adventurous time of my first week.
Sana was passionate about a lot of things, but particularly about multiculturalism, inclusion, and diversity. Can you speak to that?
I think I see Sana as the one of the ambassadors of diversity and inclusion. She talked about inclusion. She made sure that I understood how passionate she was about that, and of course, bringing my what I would call global experience, understanding what diversity mean and what inclusion mean in terms of even hiring and recruiting board members to make sure that all voices are represented. Her and I would talk about making sure that even on the staff members, we have to make sure that people are represented from a diverse community because their voices need to be heard. But also to the board of directors. It's not just the recruitment. Of course, you're looking at the skills metrics and all that, but you want to make sure that you're picking those metrics from other diverse communities as well. So Sana was really the architect of that conversation, and her and I would talk for hours and text and talk again, and but mostly really like in a fun way. We would make a working relationship fun.
You have a long background of work in countries that have been through civil wars and other horrible events, and helping to rebuild countries from a governmental perspective. I don't know if that's a good summation of the work that you did, but you have a global context. When you think about Sana, and Beth talked about her impression of here's this strong, educated woman. How did Sana and the skills that she had and the passions and the drives that she had really serve this community really from a global context?
I think Sana, when I looked at Sana, I saw Sana as many of the women that I've worked with in different countries, more than 10 countries in the past. She really acted local, but her thoughts were so global, beyond the reach. Her and I would talk about the early years of Dubai, when Dubai was rebuilding, because apparently she spent quite some time there before Dubai became the boom. And then we'll talk about, really politics in the region and the role of women, particularly the role of, the leadership role of women in rebuilding Middle East and North Africa and other parts of the world. But even her thinking of, the way she thought about the oil industry, the community, the local government institutions, that picture was bigger than Fort McMurray as far as I'm concerned. And her and I always talked about so you started from Lebanon and then you were in Dubai and then you were in Fort McMurray. Are you shrinking or you're going bigger? She said, oh, I'm thinking about that. I'm thinking about what I need to do beyond Fort McMurray. So such was Sana, and I really enjoyed talking with her.
I get the sense you could put the two of you in a room and you'd solve this whole North Korean thing in a couple of minutes. But
no, we serve the world in quite few conversations around there, and of course we will end up, hugging and talking about families and all that, and it was all fun.
In more recent times, you were working closely with Sana, probably closer than many of us. I mean, our connection is from a longer ago. How did you process the news? How did you deal with this horrific news that she had passed?
It's still very hard for me to talk about it because I did find out that she passed in a hard way. I found out when I was behind her step door, like entrance of her home. That's how I found out, because I had a meeting with her. And so knocking on the door, looking at the parking, and her car was parked, and nobody was answering. All I could hear is the voice of her cat inside the house. I'm like, what is happening? What's going on? She knows that I'm coming. We had texted prior to, the day before. And the last phone call conversation I had was 4 p.m. on the day she passed. Because her and I had, an agenda. We had AGM coming up. We were planning for that, and we were actually orienting new board members. So that's how I found out, because she was not answering the door. It was very hard, and it's still very hard for me to process. I had to keep waking myself out of a bad dream, thinking that maybe it's not true. Something like I'm in a place where something bad is happening to me, not to her. We recently had a conversation because I had got a little bit of cold and I wasn't feeling really well. And she texted me, she said, oh, Justine, I'm secretly worried about you. And I'm like, well, that's no longer a secret because you already told me. And so we laughed about that. And then, I really found myself on the night of the 7th, when I found out that she had passed, talking to her all night and say, Sana, I'm so sorry, like this didn't have to happen. And then I started to really think about her son, because every word, every conversation, Sana would be talking about her son. And that, as a parent, really touched me in a big way.
When you think about the Multicultural Association and what Sana brought to it and left with it, what jumps to mind? What will be the lasting legacy of Sana's love for this organization that you serve?
I think Sana brought the right to exist for multiculturalism, the right to practice whatever the beliefs of multiculturalism, the right to have your voice heard, the right to enjoy your cultural heritage, whether you are from, from all the corners of the world. And I think that personality right there will be so deeply missed within the community, because everyone, instead of really hiding where you're from, what kind of things you believe in, Multicultural Association helps people to feel that it's a safe place to exercise your feelings, your practice, and I think even the right to exist. And so Sana was a success to Multicultural Association. When you look at the history, the association struggled a little bit, but I also don't see that as a struggle. I see as a process for growth, because whoever had a chance to work with Multicultural Association, whether it's in the board, whether it's in the management, I think they all left something to be built on. So I see myself really picking up from where other people left. Particularly, the current board has to be inspired. So they have a choice to be inspired by what Sana brought and what she stood for and what she encouraged them and mentored them, and to build it on. And I think to really express that among the, across the community. And we need all your support to sort of kind of move on and pick up and move on again.
On Saturday, I don't know how many people were at the celebration of life, but it felt like several hundred. And it was a really amazing couple of hours. Is there a highlight for you? What happened on Saturday that is a fond, beautiful memory for you?
To me, to look at the, it's really funny because when we were talking about the theme, both Sana's son, Louie, and Sana's mother, and Sana's husband and myself, when we were in my office, we talked about the theme. And we said, what would be, the theme be? Brighter colors, clothes in brighter colors. I remember you mentioning that you will wear your purple shirt. And so to me, the highlight, every single person who came to the event, I can see them picking what to wear, thinking about Sana. And to me, that is really powerful. It's like you are thinking about the person before you even reach to the event. And so looking across the room, to me, was the moment of the truth. And I say, Sana will be smiling. She's smiling and she's loving every single face in there. And people were really celebrating. Of course, some speeches, a couple highlights made people tear up a little. But it could also be, tears of joy in some way. It's my, this is my 14th month in the community, and to see someone that I loved so much and cared for being celebrated in such a fashion was the best feeling of my life.
Justine, thank you so much for coming in.
Thanks for having me.
Justine Rukaba is the Executive Director of the Multicultural Association of Wood Buffalo, a group that was instrumental in the organization of the Celebration of Life for Sana Elache that was held on Saturday. We're going to come back with more. Valerie O'Leary is going to come in. Valerie was part of Sana's walking group and is also a good colleague in the social profit sector, and we'll hear from her in just a few minutes. You're listening to a special edition of Impact right here on 91.1 The Bridge. And welcome back to a very special edition of Impact as we remember the life of Sana Elache, a revered leader in the social profit sector. She was the chair of the Multicultural Association. She was the chair of Leadership Wood Buffalo. She was involved in the amalgamation, I'm not sure if that's the right word, of 3 different groups to create Fuse Social. And before that, she was the executive director of Leadership Wood Buffalo. She came to the community in 2004 and has made a substantial difference in the lives of literally hundreds and hundreds of people. And many of those people are leaders in our community right now, thanks in part to her incredible mentorship. Joining me right now, Valerie O'Leary, who's a colleague of mine that works at the Red Pole Center with an organization called Critical Incident Stress Management. I had to close my eyes to make sure I got that right. Or as
You're
Valerie
the one
likes
that
to say,
told me to spell it out.
I know, CISM is the acronym. But you're not here really with your CISM hat on. You're here because you are part of a walking group that Sana and Hattie, who also passed away on that fateful day, and got to know both of them very well.
Yep. So I actually met Sana through Leadership Wood Buffalo to begin with a few years back.
Were you in the program? I can't remember.
Yes.
You were?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm a graduate. So that's how I met her, and I mean, as everyone is talking about Sana, how, she's one of those people that you meet and you feel like you've met, years ago. She just had that way about her where you were comfortable. But a couple of years ago, one of the guys on the meetup group worked with Sana out at Syncrude, Barry Duncan, and he convinced her to start coming to the group. And
What is a walking group? What is a
So,
walking group, by the way?
it's actually, the walking group is enjoying Fort McMurray. So I started this up a few years back because Fort McMurray wasn't anything that I thought until I arrived. So you hear all of the negatives before arrival, and then you think, holy smokes, this is such an amazing community. And I wanted people to experience what I experienced, the outdoors, the people and stuff. And so immediately Barry had joined, and there's hundreds of us in the group, and at any given event you'll have anywhere from 20 people show up to do things. And so Barry convinced Sana. Sana, at first, she was a little bugger, and she wouldn't sign up for any of the events. She would just show up. And she would show up here and there. And it was just probably the last year and a half that she started to enjoy life like the rest of us. So Sana is one of those people that is super busy, helping the world, basically. Like, she just had this way about her on helping everyone, but she also understood the importance of enjoying life. And so we got to experience that together. And Sana sort of reminds me of that little child that you bring to Disneyland for the first time. I mean, it brought me so much joy because I'd watch the expression on her face, and it would light up some of these things, or she'd just be so childlike, and that brought the child out in all of us. And even Hattie, the same. You know, this summer we went camping, and this is a really good story with Sana and Hattie. So Sana is famous for food, right? I said to Sana, you're looking after Friday night's meal. That's it. Don't worry about food for the rest of the weekend. We're all taking, a meal, and we're supplying it for the rest. So of course Sana showed up with enough food for an army for the whole weekend. But what I think about is the Friday night, Hattie put up a tent for the very first time in his life, and he asked for help, but I got too much enjoyment watching him trying to figure it out. And Sana was sleeping in the tent. One girl had a 4-person tent. That night there was probably 7 or 8 tents, throughout in a small little area. And we went to sleep quite late. We all did the campfire stories and stuff, and then we went to sleep, or attempted to sleep. There, again, 7 or 8 tents there, and every person camping that weekend was a snorer. So we were lying there that night listening to synchronized snoring. It was awful. It was no sleep the first night, no sleep whatsoever. So the next morning, I'm grumpy as can be. So people know to stay away from me, right? If I don't get my sleep, I'm miserable. Not Sana. She was like, woke up like all of this energy. She didn't get any sleep. We talked about all the snoring that was going on and stuff. But later in the day, all of a sudden she goes, I'll be right back. And you watch her climbing into the back of her vehicle to sleep. So she wasn't like me where I'm miserable, right? And I needed my coffee to wake up. She goes with the flow. That's Sana, right?
On Saturday we heard that a lot. Yeah, and different stories from her nieces, as an example, where she'd wake them up and spontaneously burst into song, and all kinds of fun things.
Yeah, she always had that smile on her face. It's like,
So when you look back in the time that it sounds like you got to spend really good quality personal time with Sana, what are you left with, and what will you keep with you for the rest of your life?
It's that spirit where, life gets serious, life gets busy, all of this stuff. But she got it where you need to enjoy life as well. No matter what's going on in your life, make sure you make time to have those moments. And, she brought along Hattie a lot, you know, at the beginning, and then Hattie and his son Elache came out and stuff, and she was showing them, you know, as the leader in her, that life is good. It's what you make out of it, right? And the smile is the biggest thing I will remember out of both of them. Like, it's the smile.
She made you laugh.
Oh, yeah.
She made you think. What's the fondest memory, specific memory that you have?
You know, after the fires, we came back, and obviously we wanted to get back into routine. And so not everyone felt that way. No one had the energy or whatever. And I remember we went behind what used to be United Way, is now the brick up in Gregoire there. And we did this hike, and there's this really steep hill that we should have had rope to go up. It was nasty. And there was only 3 of us that, you know, showed up, and, you know, we still, you know, were doing this hike. And we got to the top, and she was so proud of herself, right? We were all proud of ourselves, to be honest. You know, because we spent a month eating comfort food and all of this, so we were quite out of shape when we came back. But I have a great picture of her with her arms spread, overlooking the valley. And when we got to the top, you could see waterways, you could see, you know, Abyssands, and you could see all of the destruction, but that's not what we saw. We saw, you know, that there was some greenery in there. There was hope in there and stuff, and that was Sana again. Like, if she hadn't been on that hike, would I have felt the same? She brought a, you know, that positive side to everything, and so it was very therapeutic for all 3 of us that day. But I think she helped quite a bit.
Valerie, thank you so much for coming in and sharing memories of Sana from your walking group.
Thank you.
Valerie O'Leary with, what was the name of the walking group again?
Enjoying Fort McMurray.
Enjoying Fort McMurray Walking Group, also with Critical Incident Stress Management located at the Red Pole Center. You're listening to a special edition of Impact. It is brought to you by the United Way, Fuse Social, Shaw TV, Fort McMurray, and 91.1 The Bridge. Coming up, we're going to have a visit with Sana's son, Louie, coming up right away. And welcome back to a special edition of Impact. Big thanks to Karina for allowing us to bite into 30 minutes of her midday show. Honored to have Louie Al-Jamal in the studio today. Louie, of course, is the son of Sana. You know, before we get into memories, you and I have been busy talking about the practicalities of the celebration of life, and we really haven't had a chance to even catch up as to what are you doing with your life. You found out the news and you were somewhere elsewhere in the world, and you had to come back. Where were you and what were you doing?
Yeah, it's a good question. I was in London, UK. I had just finished my master's last year, and I was starting to work as a freelance sound and visual designer, so projections and kind of sound and, you know, musical composition kind of stuff. Trying to figure out how to make the theater world work for me as a career, you know, and learning my ways in and out. And I was working on a project that just went to the Edinburgh Fringe, which was called Quarter Life Crisis. It was written by a Nigerian, she called herself Inglerian, so it's English Nigerian woman who was just reflecting on what it's like to be 25 and kind of trying to find jobs, and actually in a kind of fitting way, you know, a part of the story is you focus on all these trivial things in life, and then she loses her grandfather at the age of 25, and then it changes the way she looks at everything. So it was kind of, I don't know, just as one of those things that you think of in hindsight, like how poignant it can be when you work on a project and it's coming from places of just creativity, and then suddenly it touches you on a personal level in a way that you never expect. So that's where I was.
How did you find out?
Oh gosh, so it was like one of those things, word of mouth from, I think so my aunt was still in Fort McMurray, and she was the one who had the news first. I'm sure she didn't know how to go about telling the rest of the family. So she told another aunt who contacted my dad. And by the time it came to me through my father, it was one of those like, so who told you and who said what? And you know, because I'm the kind of person, I believe half of what I see and none of what I hear. So I was sitting in a car with a friend. I was about to go to my old place to pick up some knives that I forgot. We were just parked outside the house, and I thought I better call the hospital. So I called the hospital, and they said, we don't have anyone by those names. It was probably something to do with, I'm guessing, like the protocols that they have. Like if they know that someone has passed away, you need to hear about it from the RCMP.
Yeah.
So I called the RCMP, and they were very professional, and they did everything right. They asked me, "Are you alone?" All those sorts of questions. They made sure that I was the right person on the phone, and that the people who were at that they had were the right ones connected to me. And then they said, "Okay, we don't usually do this over the phone, but given the circumstances, your father's in Saudi Arabia and you're in London, and we had no other way of contacting you. We do have to say that that's true, basically." Yeah, and so in that moment, I remember feeling kind of, you never know how you're going to feel when you get that kind of news, but for me, it was like numbing. Like I said on Saturday, like I just felt like, okay, people die. I know people die, and this is now, I guess, her time to die. And what do we do now to move forward from that? And just making sure that everyone who I still had with me was taken care of. Like that was, I think, the first thing. You're just like, oh, I want Dad to make sure he's not alone, and I want my cousins to be okay because their father had passed away as well. So just reconnecting with everyone, and then allowing yourself that time to just, like meditate almost. Yeah.
You mentioned on Saturday that there was a time when it emotionally hit you.
Yeah.
What was that moment?
For me, it was it took a long time. I think it was always it came up in many different small moments, but the biggest one for me was when I was on the flight back to Fort McMurray. I think it was between London and Calgary, and I decided this is one of the times that I'm going to splurge and buy Wi-Fi on the plane because I don't want to be completely by myself. Although my aunt was with me. And I knew that once I got to Fort McMurray, I would need a support system because I knew that I would need to support my dad would be supporting me, but at the same time, we're all going through it together. So I needed people who I loved, outside of the family. And I thought, okay, there are like these few friends that I know I'm going to need their support, and I need to find a way to tell them what's happened so that by the time I land, if I need to collapse, like I didn't know how I'd react, that I would be able to count on them. And so I did that, and it was the instant, I've taken time off work from now until the 17th of September. That was my friend Melissa. So if you need anything, and if you don't need anything, just like I'm at the house. That was really moving for me. My friend Jeff as well, he was in Vancouver, and he said, I've booked a flight, you don't have to see me at all if you don't want to, but if you need an ice cream at 4 a.m., those little things that I think people, it doesn't feel like much, but when you're going through something like this, it just feels like the exposure of that unconditional love, that's what it really felt for me, was a reminder that, it's the love that I got from my mom, it's not like I wouldn't be getting it now that she's gone through other people.
You talked about the project that you are working on or just finished working on where somebody loses a grandparent and
That's right.
It changes everything.
Yeah.
Do you think that this has changed you, and if so, how?
Ooh, I think I need more time to reflect on that, but I have been thinking about it a lot. There are a lot of things, where I feel like sweating the small stuff doesn't matter as much anymore. I find I'm spending less time trying to analyze people and more time just trying to love them, or just trying to just really connect with them while I'm with them and appreciate how beautiful they can be in all of their, capacities. I remember thinking a lot of that stuff, when it first happened, I felt like, all these things that feel like they're the end of the world, or like if these decisions that you have to make, that if you don't make them, maybe, they'll stress you out too much or whatever. It's just, they went away a little bit. Yeah.
You did I thought, a beautiful job leading the organization of the celebration on Saturday. Now I understand how you were doing the multimedia piece in the middle of it.
Right.
Well, and your professional background now, maybe I can hire you when we do these things because we always seem to screw it up. So I was impressed with that.
Thanks.
But overall, from a design perspective, it felt like perfection to me. I'm interested to know, as from the perspective of the son, who got talked about a lot from various people, what was it like for you to hear all of these stories, sometimes that directly connected to your mother, and in a few cases did not? What was it like?
It was beautiful, obviously. I wasn't sure what to expect. You know, everything that I've, especially for the last, I guess, 7 years since I left Fort McMurray, anything that I've heard about the community has been through my mother, and it was quite different to hear, not only like about how the community has grown to witness it coming back, but also to hear all the things that I believe to be true about my mother come from the people who she's worked with and that she's loved in her own way. And so that was really moving for me, especially in terms of like when I spoke about her, and there were all these things that I knew I wanted to say because I believed them to be true, you know, and I wanted to speak her truth at the event. And most of them had been mentioned in one way or another by other people already before me. So it kind of felt like it was a beautiful summary at the end, especially with the videos. You know, someone I think had said, like, Sana loved to swim in the minus, you know, whatever degree weather of beach. And then we have the video where she's saying, it's totally freezing and I'm just, you know, like playing around on the beach. And it was just, it was beautiful. It was kind of like affirmation. There was just that feeling of, this is what she was, and I'm not the only one who knew it, which is nice.
Laughter was a theme that popped up many different times. How important was it to you that there was a lot of laughter at this celebration?
It was really important to me on a I don't know, subconscious level, I think, and I just wasn't, to be honest, sure how it would work out at the event, because I knew, you know, something like this is sad, and it's typically met with memorial services where you mourn, you know, the death of someone. But I just there was something in me. I had a friend who also passed away last year, and I knew I was still in London, but I knew that they had chosen to do the bright colors and and that's where that seed of an idea came from me, or for me. So with this one, I thought, you know, I want to go even more and say we're going to celebrate her life, and we're going to share the memories, because I think that's what keeps them alive, and that's what brings us closer to them. But to be honest, I didn't know whether it would feel like a birthday party, you know, or like I wasn't sure how it would play out. But I was very, very happy with it at the end of the day. You need that, I think. It's a different kind of release when you are able to laugh about how someone chose to see life, especially when it's as beautiful as she chose to see life, you know what I mean? Yeah. And like I went back home and we ended up, like, it was a surprise, but we were laughing at home, you know, and we went after the event and we were kind of, like, we felt really like there was a weight lifted off our shoulders for an evening.
There was a couple of really good stories that were pretty funny.
Yeah.
The one about the smell in the house.
Oh, God. That was my first time hearing that one,
Yeah, that
actually.
was a classic story. I want to ask, you and your mom were very close. I mean, there was many people shared that she always talked about you and the things that you were doing. She was so proud. And in fact, earlier on the show, I think Beth was talking about the book that you wrote, which it was a distant memory. What was that book? Was it like a kid's book or remind me, because I remember it.
Yeah, it was a book that I wrote, I think because I was an only child and my parents loved to travel, so I would always kind of, you know, while they were doing their figuring out the maps in the car and stuff, I would have either a notebook or a laptop because my dad was into IT, and I'd be writing away and just trying to come up with all these different stories. And this book was one that I kind of wrote when I was 11. And I remember it was one day that I was like, you know, when you're done writing something and it was like 100 and something pages, which for me was like, great, like I've done it, you know, it's now I need to publish it. So I went online and I looked at all these different kind of publishing companies, and not really knowing what I was doing, I just put my name and email and phone number and all this stuff down. And then the next day, my mom gets a phone call from Author House, which was in Indiana, in America. And they're just like, yeah, so we heard that you're interested in publishing a book. It was a self-publishing company. And I think what is like a true testament to my mother and her, like, you know, belief of making people's dreams come true. She said, yes, let's do it, you know, like, let's publish this book. Instead of like, who is this? Like, what's this about, you know? So for me, it was just kind of like her, you know, believing in me so strongly that something as simple as this, that, you know, I think if I were in her situation, I might have been like, you know, don't put your phone number out on the internet to anyone, or like, no, but the message for her was, okay, like, you did something, you're proud of it, we're all proud of it, and we want, you know, let's do the next thing, like, take it as far as you can go. So that was the story of the book.
You were so close. Is it like she's still here?
Oh, that's a really good question. I definitely feel like she's around, especially in, like, you know, obviously memories-wise, she's everywhere. Like in Fort Mac, it's such a small town that you go anywhere and you've been there with her, you know, at some point, especially as her son. On a spiritual level as well, I feel like I said before, whenever I feel that love from other people, that's when I feel like, you know, she's giving her love through that energy or through that kind of medium. Is she here in like the physical sense? I have to say no, you know. But I don't think that means she's not here. It's just that the way with which we, you know, knew her has kind of changed now.
Louie, you have a rare opportunity right now to speak directly to, and I know there's a lot of people listening that reached out, maybe were at the celebration, maybe they sent notes. You have an opportunity to speak to them directly. What would you say to all the people that have reached out to you and your family?
Oh, I would say thank you for knowing her, and thank you for, you know, because just by knowing her, I think you have shaped who she was, and you've allowed us to enjoy her as she was. And it wouldn't have been possible without even that 1 second of maybe passing her in the street that you would have, you know, had an interaction with her. And obviously, thank you to everyone who's been so generous to kind of extend their condolences or offer their support. Like, it's been overwhelming in like the best possible way, you know. Like, you know, I think they know that, you know, they don't expect us to answer everything, and you know, they're just, we're here if you need it. If you don't need us to, you know, it's fine. And just that understanding and the love, and it's been really, really helpful.
Well, our best to you and your dad. It was nice to see him. I hadn't seen him in a long time. He's looking really good.
Yeah.
And the rest of your family and your grandma, good to meet her as well.
Absolutely.
So, best of luck.
Thank you.
And thank you for coming in.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Louie Al-Jamal is the son of Sana Elache, who passed away tragically a number of weeks ago, but we remember her fondly and with great celebration in the life that she led. You've been listening to a special edition of Impact, a very special edition. It is a team effort of United Way, Fuse Social, Shaw TV Fort McMurray, and our friends right here at 91.1 The Bridge.
Russell, I know you want to sign off, and that is your regular sign-off, but you have been speaking to people now over the past hour and really engaging people. But I want to, at this stage, ask you your favorite memory of Sana. If you say Sana, what comes to mind?
Oh my God. Yeah, I guess maybe the last time I saw her, which was at the Multicultural Expo, several people described the same thing. You make eye contact across a room and she just lit up. And like a ray of sunshine, it was like a magnetic pull, and you got that big hug, and it didn't happen often because we just seemed to be doing different things. But when we saw each other, it was always that way. And for me, Sana will always be here. Not in the physical sense either, but in the spiritual sense, for me, that's the lasting impression, for sure.
You led the celebration of her life. You were involved with that. It was your idea to have this hour-long impact program. She has really impacted your life. What way would you say was the most impactful? How did she change your view of the world?
I don't know if she changed my view, but I think as the news came that she had passed, and watching, I keep using the word ripples, but the ripples that she created, the positive ripples in the community, it was one of the most beautiful things that I've ever seen. And certainly the celebration of life on Saturday confirmed or reconfirmed that. People came from all aspects of her life in great numbers. People that I hadn't seen in so long. And so it's really reassuring to know that this beautiful person, this beautiful human being, will live on through the lives of many other people. And I think that is the greatest compliment and really the greatest role model that we could possibly have. And I think it's a beautiful thing.
Everyone can leave them a legacy, but it seems like Sana's will last for a longer time here in Fort McMurray. I almost want to say there's a Sana-shaped hole left in our community, and to everyone who is mourning her and also celebrating her life. Know that you're in our prayers and in our thoughts from 91.1 The Bridge.
Thank you, Karina.
Thank you, Russell, for coming in this morning.